So my guest today is Dr. Natasha Filippides, but we're calling you Dr. Natasha. I love that. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. I'm so excited to have this.
Well, oh my goodness, you're doing such incredible work in the world with equine therapy. You're a psychologist and a coach. You're helping people in such a holistic and organic way. It seems like you really get how to manage and work with people in the most beautiful ways, and I want to talk a lot about that. But if you would be so kind, I'm always fascinated, and readers and viewers are always interested to know how you came to this path and sort of where you came from.
Absolutely. Well, I was one of those, horse crazy girls from day one. So My Little Ponies, Breyer horses, the whole thing. I was hopelessly in love with horses
Oh my
from
goodness.
as I met my first horse. And what's interesting is my family also has a history with horses. So my parents and grandfather were all Grand Prix show jumpers and were, avid equestrians, just
Oh,
also in love with horses. And so I grew up, I was fortunate enough, I had a pony early on. I lived in, Virginia, which was pretty rural area, and got to just go into the woods with my horse and spend amazing afternoons.
so you went
And
right from walking to horseback?
essentially, pretty much. Exactly. And it was, some of the best memories of my childhood. And then as I grew up, I also found I was really fascinated by philosophy and psychology and just what makes humans tick and what does this all mean and who are we, those big existential questions at a very early age in my teen years. And then as I got closer to having to figure out, okay, what do I want to do for college and pick a major? I was like, well, I don't know if there's a job being a philosopher anymore. That doesn't really fit in this world. But I came across psychology and I always wanted to help, be of service to people. I also think, my brother was diagnosed with autism when he was 3 years old, and I'm 2 years older than him. And so watching that journey, the therapists, the people involved in his life, I think all of these pieces brought me to want to study psychology. So I went right into my bachelor's degree. And as I moved through the stages of getting my degrees, I was in my master's program, and I started looking into what I wanted to do for my thesis. And I started exploring horses and humans, and they were very healing to me growing up. They were my safe space. So I thought, all right, let me see what's out there. And I knew that there was equine therapy, meaning actually what's called hippotherapy, for people struggling with physical disabilities and autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome. And I knew there was that physical component of therapy with horses, the riding aspect.
Mm.
But I didn't know that there was something called equine assisted psychotherapy, which is different. There are many different modalities, and we could go down that rabbit hole. They're all different forms. But the kind that I ended up going into, equine assisted psychotherapy or equine assisted learning, is much more about the relationship with you and the horse on the ground. So there's very little to no riding, but it's activities and exercises using the instinctual wisdom of horses to help us with mental health issues, confidence, a number of different areas of our lives.
Oh, okay, wow, that's incredible. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack here. But I want to go back a little bit, because you said in your teens you were already feeling an affinity for service and helping people and answering the existential questions of life. Did you have a point of view in your teens about these questions?
Not so much. I think I was definitely just searching and seeking and reading all kinds of things. I delved into, Nietzsche in my in my early graduate degree, and then I started delving into the depth psychologists as I was leaving my master's program into my doctoral program. So I fell in love with Jung and Freud and their writing. And even, Joseph Campbell and what he wrote about. I love mythology. And so they were some of my close friends reading their books. And
So then you evolve, you go to college, you get your degrees, and you become essentially a psychologist, a therapist. And is your family supportive of this? Did they, I mean, being a horse family, I don't know what they did, but were they supportive of these endeavors?
yes, absolutely. So it's funny. My mom's Persian, my dad's Greek, and the joke in the Persian community is always, you have to be a doctor or a lawyer.
Oh,
And
okay.
so most, and my mom, really wanted me to be a lawyer. She was like, "Oh, that's a great degree. You'll be able to do all kinds of things." And it just wasn't for me. But she was very happy the day she came to my graduation and could call me Dr. Natasha.
Oh, I love it. Okay,
Now they're
so
not happy. I use them all the time going through graduate school, like therapizing them and using all my, what, this might be what's going on with you. So that drove them a little crazy at times, but they put up with me. They were gracious.
okay, so did you go straight into being a traditional therapist, or did the equine therapy start immediately?
I did a little bit of both. So I was doing my internships that I needed to do for school in a very traditional setting. And I got to work at a wonderful clinic in Beverly Hills called the Maple Center for my doctoral training, and which is much more psychodynamic and psychoanalytic, so fabulous training program. But simultaneously, when I was doing that master's thesis, I started calling around all the programs. I was living in Southern California at the time, so I was calling all the programs I could. And I stumbled upon Stand and Balance and my mentor, Dr. Val Coleman. So very early, and the field was still much younger at that time. This is about 15 years ago. I started interning with Stand and Balance while I was interning doing traditional therapy. And so I learned both together.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And now, do you split between regular therapy and equine, or how does it work now?
So one of my favorite ways to do either therapy or coaching really is to be able to have the talk therapy or the traditional coaching sessions, and then couple it with the equine work. Because what I found is that a lot of times with my clients, they would be at a place where they would have a ton of insight. They could see their patterns. They could see, this is what's been going on in my life. I see from my childhood where this came from, my defense mechanisms, all of that. But things weren't shifting. Things weren't changing in their lives. So that's where we would go out into the arena with the horses and do the experiential work, because the beauty of the experiential work is you can't just intellectualize it. It's not purely cognitive. It brings it into the somatic realm and into real time. So you have to practice essentially what you're preaching. You have to practice, like if I'm working on boundaries or, healthy communication skills, I have to actually put that into play. And the horses are the most honest, best, mirrors in the world. They give you immediate feedback with no judgment. It's just what you see is what you get with them. So if you shift a way you're communicating, they'll shift.
Interesting.
You relax your body, they'll relax their body.
Oh, it's fascinating. Well, now, do they already know how to be around horses? Do you train them? I mean, they're such large, intimidating animals to the average person. How do you introduce it, or do people already know how to be with horses? How does that work?
It's such a good question. So we have people from all different backgrounds, from kids pretty much age 7 on up. And so we've had people actually who are afraid of horses. We have people who are avid equestrians and have their own horses.
Oh,
And so we approach it a couple different ways. So let's say I have somebody who's really fearful of horses. The good news is we have, and I'm speaking specifically about Stand and Balance, which is located in Westlake Village, California. And also out here, I live in southern Missouri now. There's also a ranch I work and do some of my coaching sessions there. At both locations, we have different size horses. So sometimes we may start with a mini horse or a mini donkey even.
Oh,
Yeah, and then move on up. And we also have different levels of challenge with the horses. So a lot of the horses are rescues. So they all have very different backgrounds. Some have their own traumas. And so some of them are very easygoing, really extroverted and friendly. They all have their different personalities, as we say. And some are more challenging because they've had their own traumas and their own background. So with clients, we work always challenging them. I like to say, I want to stretch you, not hurt you. So when they're ready, we'll move up to a different horse that's a little bit more challenging or a bigger size.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And it's interesting that you said experienced equestrians would come. It would seem they don't know how to do that by themselves. They need a facilitator.
So it's so interesting because I was a competitive equestrian my whole life. And until I started doing equine therapy towards the end of my master's program. I was about 23. And until I got off the horse on the ground with them, eye to eye, spending hours observing their communication, their herd dynamics, I didn't know their language. Actually, you know what I tell people? I probably knew their language more when I was a child, very young, before I got into, the discipline of riding, and this is how you do it, and this is what you don't do and what you do, and being on the horse and it being very results driven. So when I got out of the saddle is where I really learned the psychology of the horse, how they communicate, and that's what we capitalize on.
So tell us, how do they communicate?
Yeah, so the beauty of equine learning or equine therapy is that horses are prey animals and we're predators, actually. So if you notice, we have eyes in the front.
Yes.
And they say that's meant to hunt. And eyes on the side are prey animals because they're always looking 360 for any predators. And actually, horses and humans have such a long history, and we often look at how they are one of the only prey animals that has partnered with humans in the way they have. We have dogs and cats in our lives. They're predators as well. Cows, deer, all prey, but they haven't partnered with us in the way horses do.
Right.
And so what makes them so unique for therapy is because they have those prey animal instincts, they're super tuned into their environment. They can sense the energy around them.
Interesting.
I was doing a lot of research early on, and I was reading about how they can feel our heartbeat 4 feet away. They can sense if a predator is walking by on a nearby hill, if it's eaten or if it's on the hunt, and react accordingly. So they are super tuned into their environment. And as soon as we become part of their environment, they're very tuned into us. And they give us this non-biased, non-judgmental feedback moment to moment. We call them like big biofeedback beings with a heart and a soul.
Wow. So what's the first step or the first communication or the first thing you're trying to accomplish when you put someone with an animal?
So the first thing is I'm assessing. So I'm always assessing, where are their strengths relationally, and where are their challenges, and where are the patterns. You can very quickly see, for example, somebody will come into the arena and a horse will walk up to them, breathe on them, snort, and then walk away.
Oh.
Let's say that happens. The person immediately goes, oh, that horse doesn't like me, they hate me, and I'm no good. And you see, this always happens to me in my life. I want something to happen and it doesn't for me. And so you can tell right there a pattern in their life, a way they're thinking about things, that they're thinking they're being rejected. When maybe that horse came, said hello, and just went off to go hang out with its other friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or the person goes, this horse loves me. It thinks I'm the greatest thing in the world. You know, so it's just a different way of experiencing a context and a moment. And so I'll begin with an assessment. They usually observe the herd. And so in that observation, you also get a lot of projection. And that's good. We want the projection. So, oh, that horse over there reminds me of my husband, my kids, myself.
Oh.
You know, so it's very metaphoric and symbolic. And we encourage that, we use that.
Oh, okay. So you ask them to make those projections, or they
Yes,
offer them up? Oh, okay.
a little bit of both. We might say something very open-ended, like, what did you notice?
Hmm.
What are you noticing happening between them? Does any one of them remind you of yourself or someone in your life? And through that, it's almost like those projective tests psychologists will give, like a Rorschach. You get to see so much of somebody's inner world right there. And that gives us information about where the therapy will go or where the coaching will go. And so that always start with an observation, and then a couple easy basic exercises, like we might say, all right, go ahead and here's a halter and a rope and go connect with your horse. And people will be like, Natasha, you're kidding me. I don't know what this rope is or what this contraption is. What am I doing here? And again, the beauty of the experience is being in the unknown, because I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Your way may be different than my way. It's not about horsemanship at all. And so people will go out there and you learn how they adapt to an unfamiliar situation. Do they tackle it head on and force it? Do they feel pressured by it? Oh, you're watching me, Dr. Natasha, and thinking I'm doing a horrible job, you know, or I don't know how to do this, I'm going to give up. Or you see some people going at it for an hour without giving up, and they will just keep going and going.
Tenacious. Well, how do the horses, what do the horses think? I mean, you're not an animal communicator, or not verbally, but what do they think of it? I mean, do they like this? Do they feel that do they know their role, or what's going on from the horse's perspective?
Right. So that's also exceptionally important. On one level, our horses are co-facilitators. So as a side note, these horses have their own chiropractic, their own special supplements. They are taken care of because they do so much hard work and have to be around so much deep emotion. So we always make sure they're not burning out. They have enrichment. If they don't feel like working that day, we take that into consideration. Some are just really not about the group therapy or the group workshops. They prefer the one-on-one. So we always take how they're feeling into consideration. But in the example I was giving, let's say somebody's trying to halter for the first time and they're navigating through this unknown puzzle. We'll watch the horses, because sometimes somebody will get so focused on the task, they'll forget how the horse is feeling. Is the horse getting scared? Is the horse getting frustrated? Are they tuned out? Are they tuned in? So much about equine work is about the relationship, about self and other awareness. We curate these activities and exercises to simulate life.
Yeah.
So the arena becomes the arena of life. Yeah. And what happens in the arena parallels life. And then we use the arena to practice the skills we want to develop and the tools we want to build for life.
Well, so what's the duration of a treatment? I mean, is it 12 weeks, a week? I mean, is it individual?
It's pretty individual. So some people will have a therapist or a coach and they'll come in purely adjunctively. They just want to do equine work
Mhm.
for a specific reason. It's very solution focused, and we can do 2 to 3 sessions.
Oh,
Some people like to have it ongoing
mm,
and it be their primary source of therapy or coaching.
mm,
And so that can be one form. And then I've worked with therapists and coaches over years where let's say somebody who's really struggling with severe PTSD or complex trauma, they may have an EMDR therapist, and they're adjunctively doing the equine work I've seen people for years.
mm.
So it really is individual, and we like to curate that. And then some people will come once a month. Most sessions are about an hour long. If you're doing weekly, an hour is great. If you're doing every other week or monthly, we try to encourage like a 90-minute session. That
Mm.
way you get about half an hour to touch base, catch up, and the full hour to have the experience.
So is this a service that insurance pays for, or is this something people self-pay? How does this work?
So both, a lot of people will self-pay, especially, depending on what type of insurance they have. HMOs don't generally cover it. If you're doing equine assisted psychotherapy, which is more of the mental health focus than the equine assisted learning or coaching, are more in the coaching modality. So if you're doing equine assisted psychotherapy, insurance companies, we actually put the same code as a traditional psychotherapy session. So it can be billed that way.
Oh, I see. So you must have more applicants or clients than you could possibly want for this kind of treatment, I would assume. I would think everyone would be flocking to be with these animals and have this approach.
It really is, especially in Southern California. It has really taken off where now, in terms of treating trauma, even research has shown that certain forms of talk therapy aren't really helping with trauma because trauma is so embedded in the body. So things like yoga, EMDR, now they're even talking about psychedelics, but equine therapy is fabulous for people dealing with, I mean, we've all dealt with some form of little trauma or big trauma.
Mhm.
So it is gaining speed and growing. And a lot of treatment centers for addiction, substance abuse, dual diagnosis, it's almost a premier treatment. All these programs have to have equine therapy to be kind of up to par in the field.
Interesting. Okay. Wow.
But out here
So,
in Missouri,
yeah.
it's not as prevalent. So hoping to, build more and get more access, have people have more access to this type of work.
Do you have any client stories or anything that stands out as one of the more remarkable moments? I imagine there's many, but is there anything you can share in terms of someone who had an experience with one of these animals and was transformative?
I think I have so many, but I think one of the story that popped up just now, it wasn't even the one I was planning on sharing, but I was working with a preteen, because I used to primarily do kids and teens. I feel like when it comes to treating teenagers and kids, putting them in an office can feel very pathologizing to them.
Mm.
Talk therapy is great to an extent, but they want to learn skills. They want to know how to deal with a bully, how
Mm.
to feel more confident. If you set up a difficult obstacle course and they got through it with a 1,200-pound animal, they are beaming with confidence.
Mm.
So I love doing equine therapy with kids and teens. And that was primarily a lot of what I did early on. Now I do more adults and couples and do more relationship work. But one of my favorite stories was we had just gotten a new black thoroughbred. And she was like, it just looked like Black Beauty, the white star and everything.
Mm.
And this horse had so much trauma.
Mm.
Feet were all messed up, had ulcers, just completely neglected. And so we were really rehabbing this horse before we could even use her in
Mm.
therapy. So no one had really used this horse yet. And this particular preteen was really struggling, was starting to become more and more resistant based on what they were dealing with bullies and depression and anxiety and some serious confidence and identity issues. And they didn't even want to come to equine therapy anymore, which was very rare. They were getting very, very resistant, and they loved animals. So I decided one day, I said, you know what if we go ahead and meet that new black mare? And the kid perked up and was like, okay, I'll try that. Wasn't afraid at all. And so I was watching this horse that had so much trauma and this kid that was dealing with so much. I was a little bit nervous, like, okay, let's see how this works out. This was kind of a shot in the dark to just try and see if something would get through to this kid. And the two of them started forming the most beautiful bond. This horse that would nip at people and just put her ears flat back, wanted everyone away from her, wasn't really sure if she could trust anybody getting close to her. And this little, 12-year-old walks over and they start nuzzling together and just walking together without a rope and halter. The horse was following her.
Amazing. What a beautiful story.
And then the conversation after that was essentially this kid was saying, I don't always feel understood, and I don't think this horse feels understood. People think I'm this or that. And I think this horse, people think she's this way or that way, but really, we both have a lot of pain. And I was just sitting there, eyes wide. I'm like, okay, don't move, don't say anything. This is fabulous. And it was just the beauty of the work.
What an incredible story. And I'm sure you have many, but that really illustrates the point. Well, this is a little bit off topic, but I can't help but ask this question, but you seem to have epitomized manifesting your perfect dream job scenario. You're getting to serve, you're getting to work with horses, you're helping people in a very profound and meaningful way. Is there a formula for other people to be able to manifest their best reality?
Oh, that's such a good question. And, I feel very blessed, and, I feel like God gave me gifts, and that's what I'm here to do. But I think the biggest piece of wisdom is, I've been through so much adversity in my life. And through that, I think there's always two paths you can take. Why is this happening to me, or what can I learn from this? And so that has been my North Star, so to speak. And so whatever I went through, I was like, what can I learn from this? And through each gem of wisdom, something that I learned, I would try to bring that into my life. And when I started feeling, I think the other piece is when you start feeling stagnant or like at a plateau, to not be afraid to make changes. I think there was a point where I loved working with kids. I just loved it. But then at one point I was like, I think there's something different I want to do here. And I didn't know what that was. And it was scary. And then over about a year process of being in this unknown and not sure what I wanted to do next, but knowing something needed to change because I was losing that spark. And if I don't have that spark, I don't want to do what I'm doing. I'll fire myself first. I have to have that joy in it and that energy and drive behind it. And so over a year it was almost like going back into a cocoon and coming out again. So it was sort of like like a phoenix going into the ashes and coming out again. I was a pile of ashes for a moment, but I had the support and the courage to go, okay, how can I visualize what I want and move toward it? And that ended up being, I love working on relationships. And so I started doing more couples coaching and relationship coaching, and that spark came back.
Fascinating. So really
So, and I
tuning into ourselves,
settle.
honoring ourselves and learning from our experiences, and courage. It takes some courage.
Yes, to make, I think that's the biggest thing. Like I have a lot of clients right now that are struggling with change and how to make changes and feeling stuck. And I think COVID brought a lot of things forward for people. And so that courage that if something's not the way you want it, explore and really look at it with honesty and then go, okay,
Yeah.
what can I do? What can I move here?
So are you taking clients? How do people find equine therapy, or if they want to work with you, where, how?
Yes,
Can people work
I
with
am.
you, or are there a lot of equine centers, or what's the best way to navigate this?
So if you're in Southern California, I recommend Stand and Balance in Westlake Village, and you can find them and all their information at www.standandbalance.com. If you want to work with me, my website is www.drnatashafilippides.com. So you could maybe spell that out in the magazine. But I am taking clients. I take virtual clients all over the world for coaching, couples coaching. And if I'm in LA, I'll take people doing equine therapy at Stand and Balance at the ranch. Beautiful, a ranch in the Santa Monica Mountains. Or out here, if you're in Missouri as well. I see people in Rogersville, Missouri, which is also very green and beautiful and surrounded by fields. So different, beautiful areas, very different.
Well, this is also fascinating. I've learned a lot today about horses that I never knew, and it's such an appealing area. And I thank you so much for all the incredible work you're doing and the difference you're making in people's lives. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. I really appreciate your questions. Thank you.